Do you have a shady area in your yard? Perhaps under some trees that nothing seems to grow in, not even grass? If so, you will want to pay attention because I am going to cover one of the best native ground covers for those heavily shaded areas, Canadian wild ginger, Asarum canadense, also known by the names common wild ginger and just wild ginger. While it is called wild ginger, it is not a true ginger, and it has a characteristic that makes it quite different from true ginger. But I will save that discussion for a bit. Wild ginger is best known for its deep green, heart-shaped leaves that stand erect on pairs of long petioles. Petiole is the botanical term for a leaf stalk, and its ability to live in deep shade, dappled shade, and even partial shade. If you've ever wondered what those terms actually mean, I'm going to take a moment to explain them. Deep shade means an area gets no direct sunlight to 2 hours of direct sunlight per day. Partial shade is an area that receives 2 to 6 hours of direct sunlight each day, and dappled shade is scattered sunlight to the ground through a high tree canopy all day long. Wild ginger will thrive in all those sunlight conditions if there is decent soil moisture. It is not a drought-tolerant plant, but can handle plenty of heat if it has moisture. It can even handle soils that are occasionally wet. Soils with high organic matter are preferred, but wild ginger can also be found growing in the wild on shallow, rocky soils. My experience with wild ginger is it is quite adaptable to soils if there is enough moisture. This newly planted bed of wild ginger is in my backyard, under a maple tree, on some rough cherty clay loam soil, and it has taken to it quite well. And yes, there is a stiltgrass problem in this bed, but it will be hand-pulled once it gets tall enough to make it easier. The war on invasive species is never ending. Canadian wild ginger has a large range in eastern North America. It can be found everywhere but the extreme deep south and Florida, if there is moist soil and enough shade. The leaves are the showy part of this plant, but the flowers, though often hidden, are super cool. The small, solitary, three-lobed, scentless, purplish-brown flowers bloom in April and May, depending on location, and are found at the base of the petioles, right on the ground, and are often hidden completely by the leaves. It might take some searching to see if ginger is blooming. While this flower placement might seem a bit odd, it makes perfect sense when you know how they are pollinated and how the seeds are dispersed. You might be thinking, wouldn't most pollinators have a hard time finding a flower that is low to the ground, possibly obstructed by leaves, basically camouflage colored, and has no floral scent? And you would be correct. The flowers do not need to be found by insects because Canadian wild ginger flowers are almost entirely self-pollinated. Not like we usually think of self-pollination, where flowers on the same plant can pollinate each other with the aid of insects or the wind transferring pollen between them, but rather the individual Asarum canadense flowers pollinate themselves without any outside help from insects or the wind. Some species of wild ginger are pollinated by insects such as flies, and this method of pollination is often assigned to Canadian wild ginger still today, even though there are plenty of experiments that have shown it is not the case. If Canadian wild ginger's self-pollination isn't cool enough, the seeds produced by it are dispersed by ants. Each seed has a fleshy appendage on it called an elaiosome. The elaiosome are rich in fats and proteins and are attractive to ants, which will haul the seeds to their nest so they can feast on the elaiosome. The seed itself is not harmed in the process, and it is transported to a location away from the parent plant, helping the species spread to new areas. Super cool! If you love learning about the craziness of some of our native plants, pretend that like button is a bloom hidden in a patch of wild ginger, and dig in and find it. There are a couple of reasons wild ginger makes such a great ground cover. First, it spreads vegetatively by rhizomes, a fleshy underground stem that resembles a root. It doesn't spread so quickly that it can become a problem, usually advancing 6 to 8 inches per year in all directions, but quickly enough that it will fill in a decently planted bed within a reasonable time. One great thing about plants that spread by rhizomes is they are incredibly easy to divide. Wild ginger is no exception, and it can be divided in the spring after the leaves emerge to plant new areas or fill in an existing bed. The other reason wild ginger is such a great ground cover is it is not an overly large plant. Individual plants range from 6 to 12 inches tall with a 4 to 6 inch spread. Though the individual plants are on the small side, wild ginger will eventually fill in to form a beautiful carpet of dark green, heart-shaped leaves. While we're on the subject of plant propagation, have you ever planted some native flower seeds and then when they started to germinate, along with all the various other seeds that were either in your soil or blew in on the wind, you had no idea which were the native sprouts that you had planted? I know you have. So have I. It can be super tough to tell what is what, especially when you're planting new species. If you have been looking for a reference that has pictures of the seedlings of commonly planted natives, I have some good news. The Gardener's Guide to Prairie Plants by Diboll and Cox has just such photographs in it, as well as photos of emerging established perennials, the mature plant, leaves, flowers, and even the seed head, plus a ton of other useful information. It is an excellent book, and I consider it a must-have for any native plant gardener's reference collection. We like it so much we included it on the recommendations page on our Backyard Ecology website, where we list all of our favorite field guides, books, apps, and equipment that we use. I will put a link to the Backyard Ecology recommendations page in the description. And while you are there checking out all the cool stuff on the recommendations page, be sure to sign up for our Backyard Ecology newsletter so you can stay in touch with all things backyard ecology. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that there is a huge difference between wild ginger and true ginger. Aside from the fact that wild ginger and true ginger are in two different families, Canadian wild ginger is in the Aristolochic, the birthwort family, and true ginger, Zingiber officinale, is in the Zingiberaceae, the ginger family. They also differ in their chemistry, which is quite important. True ginger is known for its culinary and medicinal uses, and of course, its distinctive smell. Wild ginger has a similar smell, but also contains a compound called Aristolochic acid, or AA. Most, if not all, plants in the Aristolochiaceae contain AA, which is how the acid got its name. Throughout the past, Native Americans and the European settlers that came later used wild ginger in various ways. As a flavoring in food, and as a herbal medicine, both internally and externally. They had no idea wild ginger contained AA, or they may not have been so keen to ingest it. We now know that AA is both acutely and chronically toxic. Specifically, it has nephrotoxicity. It damages your kidneys. What we don't know is if the effects are cumulative, how long AA stays in your body, and if there is any such thing as a safe dose. On top of that, AA is also a carcinogen and has been linked to urothelial cancers of the urinary tract. So if you like to pee, I know I do, how else would I create mudding spots so I can take cool pics of butterflies? What? I can't be the only one that does that. It is probably best to steer clear of ingesting wild ginger. There are much safer plants to forage. Wild ginger is a great example of what is wrong with common names. Plant sounds delicious, but turns out to have kidney-killing toxins and can cause cancer. See why I prefer the Latin? There is one huge bonus to all the essential oils and AA that wild ginger contains. They make it deer, rabbit, and woodchuck proof. We have tons of all those critters on our farm, and I have never seen them touch wild ginger. If you want some showier flowers mixed in with your wild ginger ground cover, it pairs well with many of the wild violet species. If you want to pair it with a ground cover that has some nice looking white blooms and produces berries you can eat, wild ginger will work well paired with one of the wild strawberries, which you can learn all about in this video, and be sure to get out and explore nature in your backyard.